upon you. Let me weave you a verse.
What's going on, everybody? If you couldn't tell, Xingqiu is absolutely broken, and it's not just for his E skill, which was in the showcase at the beginning of this video, but it's actually for his supportive capabilities. If you're new to the game, maybe you think that he sucks, but if you think that, I'm here to prove you wrong. He is the best support for pyro characters in the entire game, and one of the best supports overall in the entire game. So we're going to talk about his kit, what weapon to use, what artifacts to use, etc. So if we go over to his talents, you have his normal attacks, which are fine, those are whatever. If we look at his E, you'll see it does a couple things, right? First off, it does 2 hits of damage. The first thing you'll notice on this is that his skill multiplier is actually insane. Granted, this is level 11 because I have constellations on him. That much damage per E skill is actually really crazy, but then you might notice the cooldown is 21 seconds. We'll talk about how to get around that later. The second thing you'll notice is that 20% of Xingqiu's hydro damage bonus is going to be converted into additional damage reduction for the rain swords. So when the rain swords go up after you use his E, he reduces the damage taken. In my case, it says 29%, and it lasts for about 15 seconds, so those swords are going to give you a lot of damage reduction. But the reason that this is actually really super good is because it reduces your damage taken overall. So that means if you're using a shield, this damage reduction reduces the damage that your shield takes, which indirectly makes your shield stronger. So rather than focusing on shield strength, you can actually just reduce the damage you take to your shields overall, and that's just a really handy thing if you're running shields with him. That's why I'd recommend running him with shields, but that's just on his elemental skill. If we go over and look at his Q, for console and mobile players, that's his elemental burst. It creates rain swords around him just like his E, except these rain swords deal extra hydro damage every time the character auto attacks, and this can be any character, even including not Xingqiu. If you switch to another character and you still have this rain swords up, you're still going to be hitting hydro damage. Now at level 11, the sword rain damage is 103%. This does look fairly low, but if you count how many swords are hitting, it is a decent chunk of damage, and you're getting the ability to constantly vaporize or freeze. And the cooldown is 20 seconds, which looks fairly long, but with a 15-second duration, it's not too bad. The one thing that sucks about this is how much dang energy it costs. But in general, the ability to do extra hydro damage and the ability to reduce damage taken is what makes him such a great support. Being able to constantly vaporize with any pyro character or freeze if you're using a cryo character, he's just really good. So as I mentioned earlier, his E skill cooldown is 21 seconds, which can be really problematic for generating energy to make sure that you have Q uptime. So we're going to talk about his weapons real quick and how you can circumvent that. So if you're running Xingqiu and you have the option to run Sacrificial Sword, you absolutely should. You should prioritize Sacrificial Sword on Xingqiu above every single other character in the entire game. Mine is R5, and at R1 it has a 40% chance to end its own skill cooldown. So what that means is that when you use his E, you have a 40% chance of his E just immediately resetting and allowing you to do it again. So what that's going to do is it's going to let you generate more particles by using it a second time, and the reason it's so good on him in particular over every other character in the entire game is because his cooldown is so damn long. So with his cooldown being that long and with your ability to use Sacrificial to reset it, you should absolutely be running Sacrificial, not to mention it gives you energy recharge, which really helps with his stats that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But if you don't have Sacrificial Sword, you should be going out of your way to do any energy recharge sword that you can possibly get. A really good one if you have access to it is Festering Desire. The reason this one's good is because it lets you crit more and it gives you a 32% more skill damage on your E, which is already, like I said, has cracked out multipliers, and it has decent energy recharge. It's not as good as something like Sacrificial Sword, but it'll help out a lot. But if you don't have Festering Desire, the next best thing for you is going to be Favonius Sword, and Favonius has a lot of energy recharge as well. It makes it so when you crit, you generate extra particles. That's really nice for him. The only thing is that, again, you're not going to be constantly generating as much as you would with Sacrificial just by resetting the cooldown. So ultimately, Favonius would be your next best thing after Festering Desire and Sacrificial, and if you don't have access to that, then you should be using Skyrider Sword with him because that does give you a little bit of extra energy recharge regardless. The reason I didn't mention Skyward isn't because I don't have it, it's because the sword I think better fits other support characters. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad on Xingqiu, and if you have it, you can use it over something like Festering Desire if you don't have Sacrificial, but I can't really imagine a world where you don't have Sacrificial and you do have Skyward. So Skyward would be above Festering Desire, above Favonius, and above Skyrider, but Sacrificial is still going to be better. Generally speaking, you're going to want to avoid the attack swords because you just need to build so much energy recharge on him. But if you are going for a one-shot build, you can use Lion's Roar just so that way you get the extra damage on vape, but it's not really super practical. But yeah, that's basically the whole weapon setup. When we go to artifacts now, we're going to talk a little bit about energy recharge and whether or not you need to use that or attack percent. So let's get right into it. Right now, I'm running 2-piece Heart of the Depths and 2-piece Noblesse Obliged, and what that's going to do is give me access to 20% more elemental burst damage, so his swords do a little bit more, and 15% hydro damage bonus, which is going to help out my E and my Q. So I don't actually recommend using 4-piece Heart of the Depths. The reason for that is because you don't get to use his E super often unless you have Sacrificial Sword, and you're not really using it for normal and charged attacks. The thing is, you can use Xingqiu as a main DPS, but it's basically the difference between choosing to chop wood with your hands or chop wood with an axe. People who have mastered martial arts can actually break wood with their hands, and that's chill, but the thing is, an axe is going to do you a lot better, which is why you're going to want to run him as a support, even though he can main DPS. Moving on now to artifact stats, if you go look at our sands, we have an attack percent sands, but this may vary from person to person, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. And then a hydro damage goblet, and a crit rate mask. Now, if I had access to a crit damage mask, I would use it because my ratio of crit would then be around 50% to 100%, which would be an okay ratio to have. But I don't have access to a crit damage mask. If you're building him and you have the ability to get a 40 to 80 ratio or better, I would make sure that you're using crit rate and crit damage accordingly to make sure that you have that 1-to-2 ratio that we're looking for. The goblet should always be hydro damage bonus because you're always going to want to get the most you can out of the Rain Cutter swords and out of his E skill. But going on back to our timepiece now, I wanted to talk about why we use attack percent over energy recharge. So attack percent is only really good here because I have the weapon to make sure that my attack percent is being utilized and I'm still able to keep uptime on my Q. Typically what you're going to want to run is an energy recharge sands unless you have enough energy recharge as is. So if I go look at my stats right now, we have 171% energy recharge. Now this seems on the low side. If you know anything about Xingqiu, you know this seems on the low side, but the thing is that if you have Sacrificial Sword, 170% should be the threshold you're going for at the bare minimum. If you're able to get 170% with Sacrificial Sword, you are in the green. This is exactly where you want to be. You're looking for anything between 170 and 200% with Sacrificial Sword. That's going to be your comfort zone. However, if you don't have access to Sacrificial Sword and that reset, then you're actually going to want to go for anything up to around 240% energy recharge. And that seems really high if you have built any other character before that needs energy recharge. 240% seems like a crazy amount, but trust me, you're going to need it with this guy if you're not using a battery. Xingqiu is an energy siphon. You absolutely need to get as much energy recharge on him as possible if you're not using Sacrificial Sword, up to about 240%. 170% is fine if you can use the reset on Sacrificial. So luckily for me, with my attack sands, I have enough energy recharge to reach that threshold. However, you can give up a bit of damage for more uptime on your Q because overall, as far as DPS potential, as far as the amount of damage he's going to be doing over time, it's going to be higher if you have more uptime on his Q. So to summarize the entire artifact section again, in case you don't want to go back and re-listen, you're going to want 2-piece Heart of the Depths, 2-piece Noblesse Oblige, and you're going to want either attack or energy recharge, hydro damage bonus, and crit rate or crit damage. And to choose between attack or energy recharge, you want 170% energy recharge with Sacrificial Sword, and you want up to 240% energy recharge without Sacrificial. So use whatever you need to make sure that ratio happens. As I'm editing this video, I realized that I forgot to mention a specific set, and that is the Lavawalker set. If you are using the Lavawalker set, it is not good with Xingqiu unless you're trying to make him do the most damage on your team, which is a mistake. I'm not the meta police, I just made a fucking Amber guide, but every pyro DPS in the game is capable of outputting more damage than Xingqiu, which means that if you're going to be going for elemental reactions and constantly vaporizing, you should be reverse vaping, you shouldn't be focusing on Xingqiu's vapes himself. And keep in mind, this is as of 1.6. When Yoimiya comes out, we may see that change. We may see that Xingqiu is actually a viable main DPS with Yoimiya as a support. Anyways, unless you're making a one-shot build, don't use Lavawalkers on Xingqiu, no matter how much people preach it to you. It's just going to net you so much less damage across your entire team if you're using Lavawalkers on Xingqiu versus just building him with Heart of the Depths and Noblesse. I know this is going to piss a lot of people off, but if he's not your main DPS and you are not building a one-shot build with him, then it's not worth using. If he is your main DPS, then I guess go for it, but this is a support guide. Back to the video! So now that we've gone over the build, we can talk about a couple important things for Xingqiu, and you'll want to really stay tuned for this because these are important. As another general tip with Xingqiu, you can actually learn vape combos per pyro character, and this will really help make sure that you get as many vaporizes off as possible during the window of his cooldown. For example, with Hu Tao, you can actually just N1 CA, which means normal attack 1, charged attack, and just spam that, and you'll get a vape off every time. But with someone like Yanfei, you actually need to normal attack 3 times and then charged attack to guarantee the vape. If you do N1 or N2, it's not guaranteed to always work. Yoimiya will also have her own combo. If you're ever trying to find out how to always vape with a particular character, you can check out the mains networks, or you can hop into my Discord where I'm going to be posting all of the spreadsheets of all of the mains networks in just a couple days. And one quick thing I wanted to talk about before we go ahead and end this video is permafreeze, because permafreeze is something that I think is often misunderstood. The concept of permafreeze has to do with you disabling your enemy's movement and attacks, which is a really valuable tool, but it doesn't necessarily help you kill enemies faster. Maybe this is just a misunderstanding with new players, but I have seen plenty of people try to use permafreeze permafreeze teams to try to speed up their abyss time, and that's not necessarily what they should be used for. Permafreeze doesn't make you kill things faster, it just makes content easier to deal with. So if there's lots of enemies, you're not necessarily using permafreeze to kill all the enemies in one place, though it is possible. You're more focused on making sure they're not touching an objective or they're not punching you around when you're trying to hit other enemies. That's not to say you won't kill them a little bit faster with permafreeze, but that's not the objective of the team. If you're trying to play permafreeze with Xingqiu, you can use someone like Kaya who has constant cryo application. You can use Rosaria. Honestly, any cryo character in the game right now except for Eula is going to be pretty good at permafreeze. And Chongyun allows any character with a melee weapon to be permafreeze as well, so keep that in mind. Anyways, that is about it, guys. If you are interested in checking out who did the showcase at the beginning of the video, their name is Engineering Plastics on YouTube, and they will be referred to down in the description of this video and in the top comment. So if this video helped you out, or if you ended up sending it to a friend or something, consider subscribing to the channel because we make tons of guide content and we make a lot of other fun Genshin Impact content, and you don't really want to miss out. I go live on Twitch a couple days a week at twitch.tv/Braxophone. Make sure to go follow there if you want to see live content, and as always, everyone have a wonderful day.